Welcome to Built to Last, the podcast where entrepreneurs share real stories about the triumphs and challenges of building enduring success. Hosted by Colby Jardine and Levi Lawrence, this show is as much about learning as it is about sharing. Every day is a learning curve, and Colby and Levi invite you to join them as they uncover the habits, mindsets, and strategies that help organizations and individuals thrive.
We're really excited here to start a new episode of our podcast. We've been tentatively calling the podcast Business and Beyond. And we've been live kind of workshopping that with people as we've gone through the first 3 or 4 episodes. And the reason why we like Business and Beyond is we'd like to talk about the bigger conversations that apply to business. And our most of the people we're talking to are in business, entrepreneurial leaders, but there are also things that matter outside of business. Because both Colby and I don't really have that two sides of our world we try to balance, and the big topics like conflict and people and soft skills and discipline and those thread through what we hope is actually useful business conversation. So the working title is Business and Beyond, and there's some great tagline around where business mastery helps with personal excellence. We'll come up with that later. But to start, I'd like to I've actually never met Jen, so I can't do the intro. So what I'd like to do is to put Colby on the spot and introduce Jen, and then Jen gets to correct him.
Yeah.
I love it.
Colby, on the spot.
Well, so Jen, how I met Jen in the beginning was through the Entrepreneurs Organization Accelerator Group. Mm-hmm. That's how we met originally. And I know that when I feel a kindred spirit near me, it just kind of starts to magnetize. So we kind of hit it off in the beginning, and we're in complementary industries, which is even more entertaining. We've always talked about taking that steps further, and anytime we have spent time together, it's always been excellent. And I know that you're doing a lot, Jen, and pouring rocket fuel on things and casual things like that. I know that your background comes from recruiting. And you've started this company. How many years has it been?
It's 4 years. I started officially September 2020.
And look now, holy crap. Isn't that interesting? But I'll let you talk about your business and kind of whatever you're comfortable with sharing them where it's going to. But you dive right in.
For sure, yeah. So I started the Warrington Group in 2020. Really, it was at the beginning of the pandemic. I worked corporately for my whole life. Always wanted to start a business. Never had the balls to do it because it was, not responsible. It was too risky. All the things, and I was impacted through a global restructure 3 weeks shy of my 10-year anniversary. At the time that I found out I was losing my role, it was, if you're traveling somewhere, just be careful. It was not fast forward to 5 weeks later where you're not allowed to leave your driveway and you can't see family that doesn't live with you and don't visit your neighbors. So in that 5 weeks, as I was winding down my role, I thought, okay, I've got 6 months of severance, and this is the opportunity for me to go on my own as an independent consultant and still do recruitment, which I fell into as a career path back in 2007, but absolutely loved it. So again, by the time my role was finished and I knew that I had to work behind the scenes because of the parameters around the severance, I didn't have a laptop because the stores were closed. And I had to give back the cell phone that I had been using because it was a work issued cell phone. So I had a dollar store notebook, a brand new phone that I had gotten just before everything shut down. So the timing lined up there. And I really just started to go to town on my LinkedIn, figuring out how am I going to build this business so that when we come out the other side of the 2-week pandemic or the 4-week, or then, as it snowballed, that I'd have clients. So it's been an amazing 4 years. There's been so much learning, obviously being able to come part of EO, and we're now a team of 4, including myself, and we are doing recruitment for organizations. So we're finding them the talent, and we're doing career strategy. So we are helping people, figure out how to write a good resume, because 95% of them are absolutely garbage, how to use LinkedIn so that they can find their next job, and really just giving people the confidence and the clarity of what do I want to be when I grow up, because the pandemic literally leveled the playing field for everybody when it came to their careers, because everybody was back at home, or they completely lost their job, or we're going to work from home and we've got to set it up in 48 hours and off we go. So that was not part of my business idea when I was like, I was going to go on my own, but people started reaching out saying, everyone assumed I lost my job because of the pandemic, and that wasn't the case. But it was like, what are you doing? Can you help me? Can you look at my resume? And I thought, okay, if I'm going to make this my recruitment business, I'm also going to go in all on this piece. And it really just snowballed from there. And now we're leaning into a bit of an advisory model where we can go into organizations, and instead of being the one and done recruiter, we can actually help them build out the model that will attract, hire, and retain talent and just really save them a ton of money. And that's kind of where my zone of genius comes from on the recruitment side. And then it's helping people increase their salaries by leveraging soft skills and experience that our resumes really don't show, so that companies are paying people more to create value and add impact.
I
And
have
that's
so
it.
many things I want to say.
Yeah, I know, I know. Levi loves this kind of stuff, and he does a lot of coaching on the side in his spare time, and helping people with their careers, and helping with people immigrating to Canada and figuring things out. So, go.
So maybe just because I try, like, there's a score I get at the end when we look at the videos of like who talked and what percentage, and I
Yeah.
Oh,
figure
that's going to
right
be on
now
me.
anytime I get over 50%, I've lost the game.
Yeah,
Okay, so
fair.
you're already
I
losing,
tend to,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
now I'm afraid I'm going to continue to lose because I'm going to talk too much. But I do want to kind of introduce my context. I really like the space between two perspectives and to have the
Hmm.
conversation. You don't know what mine is, so
Right.
a couple things, and maybe it's validating, maybe it's not. Um, I really really see a fundamental shift of companies needing to become the employer of choice in their market.
Yes.
That's how we started. Like, our company talks about our services as helping guide companies to modernization. What's that mean for you is different.
Hmm.
But almost across the board, it means improving yourself as an employer. And a part of that is understanding that recruitment is a process and it's not a transaction. And how do you
Yes.
build it through, like, the way you deliver knowledge base, the way you deliver training, the way you talk about yourself, your sales, like everything involves you as an employer.
Hmm.
Um, and the changes since COVID, or even before COVID, I think it changed before COVID. It just accelerated during COVID. I've moderated a lot of different peer groups, and I had a speaker in who was the CEO of a fairly large and been around stable company, and he had stepped down from CEO at the peak of his career. He wasn't that old. He remained owner, but he stepped down to CEO, and he said, "You know why I did that?" He's like, when I started out 10, 20 years earlier, when I gave somebody a job, I was doing them a favor and they were grateful. And now when I hire somebody, they're doing me a favor and I'm
Yeah.
grateful. And he's like,
Hmm.
there's nothing at all wrong with that. But that is such a fundamental mind shift that I want my organization to adopt, and I won't be able to do it fast enough. And so I'm hiring a new CEO who's already there. And that was in 20, no, that was in 2019, I think. It was right before COVID. And it fundamentally clicked, and I was like, everything's changing, and the
Hmm.
people who don't see it. And so when I heard that you're, and obviously I've looked at some of your stuff and recruitment and how you're building that, is like, I'm really fascinated with what's happening now because I'm a few years out of that conversation. So yeah, I'm excited. So that wasn't a question. I just talked.
No, but that's okay. But I love that what you said, because I say this to people. Like, before it was like, please give me the job, please give me the job, oh thank you so much, like I got the job. And now it's like, make me want this job. And the disconnect, right? Like, make me want to come work for you, tell me why I should. And, old mentality is, well, like, we don't need to cater to a candidate. Like, it's a gift to have a job and it's a gift to have a salary, which, yes, it is a gift to have a salary. The reality is we all need one. But at the end of the day, it better aligns with your employer brand if you have the right people. And if you are treating people like, you should be happy that you're here versus thank you, you're going to get more out of people inside of that. And the shift really, I do agree with you. I think it was coming before the pandemic, 100%. I think that it did accelerate through the pandemic because I think everybody was home. And I love my family, but all of us under one roof for that amount of time, you do start to close off a little bit. So you do some of that inner reflection. And I say it with career strategy clients, like, we're going to take inventory of your skills and what have you. But people were taking inventory of, what do I want my work-life balance to look like? If you're traveling all the time for your job and then all of a sudden you're like locked in your house with your family, like that is shocking to everybody's systems. And so you start to think about, what do I want it to look like next? Was I actually getting burnt out because I was traveling? Do I like my boss? And so then it was, we really have to start to show we know what a number of companies do just by what their name is. That doesn't mean we know what their employer brand is. And employers are not leaning into promoting why they're amazing organizations. They only promote their product and their service. And if I can get them to switch that a little bit, the candidate pool and quality opens up significantly, and we're hiring the right people and they stay longer. And then
Yeah.
it's just everybody's happy. So I think that shift needed to happen, but there's still a lot of resistance to it from the employer's perspective.
Yeah, for sure.
And do you have any exampled stories of like, maybe where somebody did shift their mindset and it like accelerated this and made this kind of easier for them?
Like in terms of the organization or in terms of a
Yeah, in
career
terms of the
seeker?
organization, yeah.
Yeah, so we work with we have a couple of clients that we have a retainer with, and originally the retainer was, we're going to go in and we're going to hire X amount of people for you, over a 6 month or a 12-month period. And when we got in and we were like, this hiring process is like, I don't even think you could call it broken. Like it was just like it didn't even exist. And so we went back and said, we need to fix some of these gaps because your turnover rate is so ridiculously high because you're just putting bums in seats, right? And a lot of people think that that's what recruitment is. You fill the seat and it's usually very reactive. It's very hard to proactively plan if someone's going to quit or their performance isn't going to be good. And it's even really hard to plan proactively if you're going to grow. But I think what we saw with this client was, because the way that they were hiring was literally just fill the seats. And then people weren't even making it through their first 3 months for a $50,000 a year base salary. If you lose that person in their first 6 months, and anywhere in that window takes you another 3 months to fill it at a $50,000 base year salary, you are literally costing yourself almost $485,000 per employee long term, right? So if you lose four people, you've cost yourself almost 2 million or $1.5 million, right? And we were trying to get them to see that. So we're like, let's slow down. Let's raise the compensation. We had to build out the business case for them to see why that made
Yeah.
sense. But if you're losing four employees every 3 months, which is 1.4 million or $1.6 million, you can actually afford to increase the base salaries by $10,000, right? So
Right.
we had to go in and say, let's look at compensation. Let's look at the job descriptions and the way that we're attracting these people, right? Like they thought they needed the hunter from a sales perspective, but they really needed someone to nurture the relationships. So that changed the candidate profile of what we were hiring. And then we adjusted the interview and hiring process because they had like 5 steps in it. And I'm like, nobody for $50,000 a year is going through 5 steps of an interview process. I don't even know if I would go through that at my level. And I know that my salary would be significantly higher than that if I went corporately. And so ultimately, fast forward now, 3 years later, they're still our longest running retainer client. We have reduced the turnover significantly. We go to them in October and be like, okay, what's your revenue goal for the next year? They provide that to us and we go, these are the amount of people we need to hire because promotion or fall off or whatever. And then here's what we say you need to hire. And then they sign off on it and come back. And then we have our whole year plan and we just kind of like go based on those milestones, and they don't have to think about it. And their employee engagement literally went through the roof. Like I think it was like before, they couldn't even get people to fill out the employee engagement survey. No one came to the annual Christmas parties, any of those things. And now like it's completely different, and they're promoting and people are staying, and they've gone from, I think it was like $3 million a year in sales when we started with them, and like this year they're going to close in at 5.5.
Oh, wow.
Right? But they're not replacing people. Like we're adding growth, or we're adding someone, because, and not everyone works out, but for the most part, it's someone else is promoting within the company, which they're really good at doing. And then it's like, okay, well, now we've gotten new contracts. We've got to add more people. Whereas before it was, please just let the 5 people we hired make it through training and hope for the best. And that's, I was like, okay, we're not doing that anymore. You're also not going to think I'm a very good recruiter if everybody leaves within the first 3 months, whether it's my fault or not.
Right.
Right?
Are there I have a follow-up question. I'm just leading into it. What are the types, like how would you define the market? Is there industries or size of companies? And how would you describe your target that you'd like to work with?
So here's where it's challenging for me, because I worked corporately for
Hmm.
all of my career. And so even though I started in recruitment agency world in 2007, I went corporately in 2009. I worked for Eastlink Communications. So they would can be considered like a medium to large size business. And then I left there and I went to Manulife, which is like 35,000 employees worldwide. So they're like enterprise level. And so in both of those roles, I had seats at tables that recruiters in agency world wouldn't get, where we were building out all of these plans that I overhauled hiring for 5 departments within Manulife across 3 different geographies. At the same time, I could come into a company that's smaller in size like your guys and say, okay, here's the framework of how you build this out when you hire your first accountant or admin or salesperson and follow it all along. And that's as rewarding as those 5 business units that I overhauled things with. So I feel like it's really hard to say, like, where's my sweet spot? I think my sweet spot is like, where can I provide the solution that I know that you need and make it easier for you, whatever your role is going to be. Like I say, I can teach you how to fish, but I can also still go fish for you.
So maybe that's where I feel like the answer is going to be depends on industry, because I like 90% of businesses in Canada are under, I can't remember, they like under $1 million in revenue or 2 million, whatever it is. Like small business is 90% of the different companies
Right.
in the country. When do you think it makes sense for somebody to be able to bring in outside help? Is that something that anybody can do, or should they be ready or mature of a certain size?
I think if you're a solopreneur and you need to make your first hire, there's going to be a lot of value in there. Budget is obviously going to be factoring in, and that was one of the things at the early stage for me was at the beginning you say yes to everything, right? And you'll shortchange yourself in terms of what you charge and what have you. And what I really wanted to do was differentiate. Okay, this is not transactional recruitment. She's not giving me 5 resumes and telling me to hope for the best. So I led with, if you're a small business or it's your first hire, I'm going to do it for a flat rate that is like a fraction of the cost. I'm going to hold your hand most of the way, which snowballed very quickly into like, now you need to talk to my friend who is an entrepreneur, who's an accountant, and now they need to hire and what have you. So if you have someone that can work with you in that regard, I think it is really important. Your first hire, especially if you're on your own, it is like, it can be extremely beneficial to your business, but it can completely damage it at the same time. We often see that most people are in the like 1 million ish or above, that they're like, okay, well, we've tried it. It's not working. We don't have any other choice. Gone ahead. We're going to bring in a recruiter. But if they had done it maybe like a few months before that, then again, we're laying the proper foundation
Hmm.
inside of what needs to be done for the long haul. And again, building that foundation for them.
Again, I have lots of things. Like,
See you later,
Um,
Colby.
no, I'm.
just continue.
The one question that I had is there certain things that are happening in your industry that are kind of like, things that assumptions about your industry that are
Yeah.
frustrating to you, that are, it's hard for the consumer on the other end or the person hiring, like, how am I making the right choice? How do I know I'm getting a good recruiter, or
Mm.
having that outside help come in? Is there any kind of warning signs or things that
Just throw the
uh,
grenade right in there, right?
yeah, why not?
Yeah. So I think for me, and again, I've been very fortunate that like if you start an agency world and you're a good recruiter, then you're going to make a lot of money. It can be a very lucrative career. Most people that start an agency world, if they have any amount of success, they don't transition to corporate world, because then it's a base salary. Your income is capped and you don't have a say in that because it's not a commission driven role. And so I switched into corporate because I had a young son. My partner was doing a tremendous amount of travel for their position, and it just didn't feel right to me that, it's like, how am I going to be out at all these events and try to get new business? And, again, the hunt. So I switched in from a lifestyle perspective because I had a young child at the time. And so what really shifted for me was being able to see it through the corporate lens, that now that I'm back in what would be considered agency world, a a lot of it is leading with like, okay, it's very transactional. And it's like, if I can't fill the role for Colby and Levi today, I'm going to give it 3 days. And if not, then I'm going to go over to the other person who I know I can fill it faster. So people have a lot of resistance to recruiters because they feel that it's transactional. They feel like they're ghosted. They feel like they're not getting the time and attention that they need. At the same time, you're paying a really exorbitant fee tied to, the work that a recruiter does, especially depending on the role. You can turn it around really quickly. I talked to somebody yesterday who said, tell me about your process. And like, we don't have really good experience. And I'm like, here we go. I know exactly what this is going to be. And because again, you know kind of what the stereotypes are in the industry. And for recruitment, it's very transactional. It's kind of like, hey, it's the used car salesman who's coming, and if they can't sell you, they're on to the next because they see you as a tire kicker. And I talked to this person yesterday, and she said, we identified we needed two roles, and they were roles we didn't have in the company. We called our recruitment partner and said, these are two roles. We need job descriptions and we need to understand salary. And they said, okay, you have to go do the job descriptions and figure it out and then come to us and we'll help you. And she was like, what? And I was like, drooling. I was like, oh my God, give it to me. Because again, at the corporate level, when I was in it, I had to do that for my hiring managers. So I have brought that into agency world where I'm like, I'd create your job description. I'll create your interview guides. I'll sit in for you. And the agency world isn't doing that because, again, they're a commission model. So they have to literally fill it, move on, fill it, move on. A job description to them doesn't generate them revenue, when in fact, it does, because one, you've now, like, the client's like, thank you for helping me. And then they're going to use you again and again. And now this time she's like, we don't even want to use them, but we're stuck with them. And so I think the misconceptions, at least from my perspective, are that we're all in it for the money. And I mean, I think that's just the world in general. Like, we all want to make more and be more and do more. But I think it's that you don't care. You just want the fee. You're going to send me the resumes. I'm going to pick one, and then you're going to invoice me. And so I get really frustrated because I actually want to do the opposite of that, which leaves me on an island by myself as a recruiter, because the other agencies are not doing that. And I mean, I'm sure they have great relationships and they do nurture to a certain degree. But overall, I would never call somebody and then be like, this is what we need. And I'll be like, okay, well, get it back to me when you've got it done. Like, obviously someone's asking for help, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great answer. That's a great answer. That's interesting, that the corporate to agency thing that you kind of went through, that gives you that other lens.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
So,
Go ahead.
so I guess we talk a lot about just general modernization, and we're not specific to an industry, so we have to generalize a bit. But we're seeing a real need for companies to. I am going to lead to a question. We're seeing a need for people to get more direct in the way they collect information and data, and it's easy for a lot of people to understand that from in marketing. I would suggest you don't want to trust marketplace ads and marketing channels. Like, how can you at some point be getting names and emails of your clients and the people you're marketing to and have that primary data strategy? And I also are now having more and more conversations around people doing that with regards to the people. And so, Indeed is a common platform. A lot of people love, hate, typically more the latter. Sorry to badmouth the name, but you can Google it. And it's just because of the level of, like, you don't control the data or own it as well. It's there's a lot of a lot of industry, you're getting 50-60% not really real applications. A lot of people are starting to get the advice that, my recruitment should be evergreen and ongoing and not just based on reactionary need. But that's they don't know how to implement that from a tools and systems point of view. And aside from engaging you on a retainer, which I now know is an option, I didn't before, what would you say companies can do to have, we talk about, manage that user experience on your website? How do you take people through the same thought process as a sales and marketing journey for your employee? But we're also doing HRIS systems, so each human resource information system, recruitment platforms, CRMs dedicated with a pipeline to people. That level of sophistication is coming out. And I was wondering what you're suggesting to people if they're not ready for a retainer for you to do it all for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, one of the things that I think is really important that is being overlooked, so from an employer's lens, I know that when they put a job posting up, and if it's through Indeed or it's somewhere else, they're getting an influx and the quality is not great. People are applying to positions they're not even qualified for. They're just like, apply, apply, apply. Someone's eventually going to call me. And that does them more harm than good. But it also slows down whoever internal is reviewing all of these resumes, because you do have to review them all to get to the maybe 3 good ones that are there, or the 10, or depending. So I would say, don't post your position on Indeed. I would actually, instead of paying for a job posting, and I know Indeed you could do for free, but you're totally going to be bombarded with 90% of people don't even live in the country. But I would be investing in getting access to the resume database through Indeed that you can go in and search and filter for your own people first and foremost. That being said, depending on the level of the role, Indeed is not going to be for you. So if we're talking mid-manager level and below, yes, Indeed. If it's like mid-level and above and getting into director and stuff like that, Indeed is not the platform for you. The resume database is still going to have the same volume in terms of what you would get if resumes were coming through a job posting, but it allows you to have the control to start to go through and go, okay, do I want to contact this person versus that person's trying to contact me? And the other thing that I would say is, and people hate me for saying this because they're just like, it feels like it's a lot of work, but they need to have a business page on LinkedIn that they are actively using, whether it's that they're posting content or they are like tagging the company name so it's showing up, because people like me with the career strategy hat are like, everybody needs a LinkedIn profile. You don't have to be putting out 20 pieces of content a week, but you do need to be building your own network and you need to be creating that ripple effect so people can find you. And I love Gary Vee, and like I always love how he's like, he'll make a prediction to be like, in 15 years from now, this is what's going to happen, and people are like, he's crazy, and then it does. And so like my Gary Vee prediction that is in like in 10 to 15 years, we're not going to use resumes anymore. We're going to use our LinkedIn profiles, and the like we're doing it already with the easy apply button on LinkedIn. Like people, we're going to do everything through that as a platform, because I don't even think LinkedIn is 20% scratch the surface of what we can be able to do. And I think from that perspective, if you start to lean into it now, whether it's content or finding people or building your network, you're going to be light years ahead of like what's coming. And then you add in like, I got something the other day from LinkedIn that was around like implementing like AI inside of that, like LinkedIn AI or what have you. And I was like, oh my God, like it's already coming. So I think we will eventually shy away from the paper resume, downloading it and making it a PDF and submitting it through, because I
Yeah.
think it just clogs the process.
Yeah, I had one client who called it the post and pray method.
It is the post and pray method. Yeah. Yeah. And some people are like PRAY, like pray, hope they show up. And other are like PREY, we're going after them. And I
Yeah,
think that if you just put a job posting
yeah,
up, whether it's LinkedIn, Indeed, company website, whatever, and like you're just like hope for the best, your seats are going to stay open forever.
yeah.
Right. And to be, sorry, go ahead.
No, I interrupted.
No, no. So I was just going to say, like, when it comes to that proactive piece of like, should we always be pipelining for candidates? If you're telling the right employer brand story of why your organization is where people want to be, you're going to have a pipeline anyway. Because if they're following you on LinkedIn, they're waiting for those jobs to get posted. Or if they're going to reach out to someone they might have a mutual connection with and be like, oh my God, Colby, can you introduce me to Levi? Because positions come. So like, they're going to start to do that work, but people are shying away from telling that story.
I'm your choir, and so it's kind of hard to have conflict, healthy or otherwise, because I'm kind of convinced on the same side. So I've done LinkedIn coaching and career strategy. Career strategy was on my LinkedIn for a number of years, mostly with newcomers and people pivoting to new career choices. And it was kind of a personal thing. I really enjoyed it. The area where I have not been able to help somebody, where all my tips and tricks fall down, is if you have a company and you're hiring well-paid skilled trades. And I my trade was a chef, which is not a well-paid trade, but there are lots of others where is like that's a real career. It is
Hmm.
not a type of human that is commonly found on LinkedIn, and most of the ones that are qualified are not looking. And so companies come to us, and companies personally, friends, are like, have you figured out the magic sauce to the blue collar, skilled, high paid recruitment?
Yeah, so this will probably, again, people will probably hate me for saying this and roll for some figure. The magic sauce is in the fact that we need to encourage younger people to take trades as a career option, because the demography is so low right now, because
Yeah.
we were told if we went to community college and took a trade, it's because we were stupid. Right? It was if you didn't go to university, you were stupid. You had to take a trade, and the trade was just like that's just so that you survive
Every
life.
cartoon and sitcom for a 15-year period had plumbers with bum crack showing.
Right. So for me, what like, and again, so my son is 16, right? And we're having the conversations at a certain
Mm.
degree, because right now he's like, I just want to play hockey, and like still thinks that that's going to be a career choice. But when we start having the conversations, and again, parents have different mindsets, but they're like, no, it has to be university. And I'm like, please don't. If they are not sure that they want to be a doctor or a lawyer, an accountant, a veterinarian, an engineer, whatever, have them work and go and take the trade because we don't have the demography to sustain it. If someone called me today and said, Jen, I need you to hire 2 plumbers and 2 engineers or electricians and they need to be Red Seal, I have to say no, because if I'm bringing them back from out west, which is what I'd have to do from Atlantic, Canada, you can't afford to pay them. My brother's a Red Seal electrician out west. He cannot come home because we cannot pay him what he is making in Alberta. So the secret sauce or the magic wand is let's encourage more people to look at trades as an option, which parents are not going to like it because it's like, well,
Well,
that's, they're just not going to. But that's the
so your
answer.
answer is to address systemic change.
Yeah,
And you know what? I
The small things.
so
it's
we
no
do
big
a
deal.
lot of work in the Department of Education in New Brunswick, and I can honestly say there is a valiant effort to move in that direction, and it's really exciting. We get to do a lot of the communications pieces and video work. We've been doing that for a long time with them, and honestly, like it's to see like project-based work becoming a thing in schools,
Mm,
and noticing these talents earlier, and noticing that, like, why would I force this kid to do, XYZ if I
Yeah.
know they want to go do this and they can make $90,000 a year?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, it's wild.
it's super frustrating. And again, like, so my son is 16. You're having the conversations with those parents. And even when if I'm like, well, he's not sure what he's going to do, like, and they're like, oh, and I'm like, well, he'll work or maybe he'll travel. He's not going to live in my basement and be 25 and play video games. But like, I'm also not paying for university for 4 years if he doesn't know what he wants to do. That makes no sense to me. Right. But we grew up in a time, I mean, and I know that I'm a lot older than you guys, but like we grew up in a time where it was you needed to know what you needed to do with your life by the time you were 16, which if you think about it, that's ridiculous. And if you didn't either do what your parents told you to do or what they had already done, there was no way you could be successful. And trades was never an option for smart people, quote
Yeah.
unquote. At the same time, I know a lot of firefighters and RCMP that obviously the way they work shift work, they do have chunks of time off week over week that some of them started with that have trades. Now they have trades businesses and they work and get a pension and all of these other things, right? So it's like try to look at it through a different lens. I think it's great that Department of Education is starting to lean into that. We need to shift the mindset of parents because even on the career strategy side, if I work with someone between the age of, I'll say like 35 and 55, one of my questions is always like, how did you begin your career as X? My mom was it, my dad was it, or my parents didn't have good jobs, so they told me this is what it was going to be, and I just did it because they told me that. Or the guidance counselor said, these are the 5 options you have, and that was it. And like, no wonder people aren't happy.
Yeah. I'm 10 years older than Colby, and I have a degree I don't want or need. It's pays true.
And I don't have one. Right. So on paper, I shouldn't be sitting in the chair that I'm in if you think about it. Like if you literally
Right.
sit and go based on what we've talked
Yeah.
about, but I make the same in a year as a doctor. So like
Yeah. Yeah.
let people lean into where they want to be, right?
Yeah. And the trade stuff, because I am seeing, like, even the same clients I'm talking to, they're seeing more 20-year-olds.
Yeah.
Like, so I'm seeing improvement, but none of that will help them deal with the missing generation. And so, like, building them up as a sought after destination versus one of many options is the best advice I've been able to give.
Yeah, and I think you're right there because I think what we do is we then lean into the employer brand, right? We lean
Yeah.
into if you start your career here and we're going to help you succeed to get to the point of Red Seal or Journeyman or what have you. There's options for you, maybe depending on the company. You can buy in at a later point. If you can tell the story of why they want to be there, as
Yeah.
well as what's the succession plan for the next 10 or 15 years of your career, especially with trades, you're going to lock them in long term and they will fill that gap. It's like imaginary in that sense, but
Yeah.
the company needs to invest in telling the story more. So we're going to pay you this amount of, a wage and whatever. Like they really need to lean into that.
Well, like what a disruptive opportunity in that industry for marketing and positioning
Yes.
those trades companies and those more traditional older companies that might have been around for a while, and they're going to have to
We
change.
use traditional instead of old in our language. We're trying to switch.
Understood.
Traditional, yeah, traditional
Understood.
businesses. Like, I think it might have been Gary Vee that actually talked about this. He was like, when are people going to realize? Because everyone's, it's still happening. Everyone's talking about their side hustles and these things that they're up to and starting these little tiny businesses. And it's just like, when are people going to realize that trades it is like, you can
Yes.
just do that and make so much money and hire people and live a great life. And
I'm
And
not
I
sure
think
that's still not caught up. Just saying.
Right.
no, but also to the point, like if you think about the way that the world is evolving from like a social media perspective or just again the presence, like you could monetize a podcast about cooking or being like a Michelin chef or like whatever, or you could teach people how to do that stuff. Like there's so many other ways that
Yeah.
you could go with it versus I just need to work at the best restaurant in the city and that's it. But
Yeah.
we're no one's like that's where I'm like, let's look at the growth mindset of that and let's look at how we can create options, right? And people are afraid of the options.
I often follow. I catch myself watching people do landscaping in yards, and they stream it, and they make a living off of. They actually do it all for free, and they make a living off of the content, which is wild.
Right.
You're
Well, look
watching.
at well, yeah, but look at the guy that does he's like a young kid and I forget what his name is. And he goes and he shows him like knocking on the door and let me wash your windows. And we're doing
Yeah.
the road. And they're like, well, my husband's not home or my wife's not here. She already booked it. And they're like, no, but what if I could just whatever? And then, I said to my son, like, you should get some of your buddies. And like between the two subdivisions, we've got like 2,000 homes. Like that's where I'd be going and do it every summer. Like, and
I
you're
actually
done.
did hear that window washing specifically was one of the easiest ways to start making money immediately. Like you
Yeah.
make good money and it's pretty quick.
Yeah.
If you went and asked my wife right now whether we'd buy that service, it would be a yes.
100%. I don't
But
know
we
if my
probably wouldn't go looking for it, but we would
right.
definitely say yes.
And this is really interesting. I at my EO meeting, it was like our group, our accelerator group, and we were talking about something, and someone said, like, I really wish there was someone to clean my barbecue. And I'm like, is that even a thing? And then lo and behold, because the internet is always listening, something popped up that in Halifax there are these two young guys, maybe 18, that they go around and they clean and winterize your barbecue for the winter.
Okay.
My beautiful barbecue sitting in the snow right now. I should have had that service.
Yeah,
Right.
and I almost burned down my house the other day because of that. So relevant.
Right?
Yes.
So I think that the disruption has to come from the older generation being like, hey, let's be open to possibility because I think the younger generation doesn't know anything but possibility.
So a lot of I'm from the food and beverage industry. I love and I'm very close to it. And a lot of them are having really dire problems in hiring, no matter what they do. It's just, it is what it is. But the reality is, and not everybody agrees with me, and I could argue all day long, but like if you really want to make 40 grand a year, there's 1,000 ways to do that.
Absolutely.
And it used to be that there wasn't as many and that you needed those jobs. But and there's not a new cook in Atlantic Canada making 40 grand a year. And so that's a really big world change.
Well, and I think that's like, technology, right? And then like time is like insane right now. It just gets faster and faster. So again, the opportunities become plentiful that my 16-year-old who basically plays hockey or lives in the basement and hangs out with his friends, he could literally see something on Instagram or TikTok or talk to a friend or whatever, and they could start something and they could be making more money than the three of us in a year. But they're also not as afraid to try stuff because they're seeing on their screens, which I know that there's arguments for that screen time is bad for you and what have you. But it's also opening up our young people to like, there's a ton of possibility. I'll try to wash windows. I'll start to clean barbecues. And they can teach themselves the stuff that we would never have been able to figure out before.
Well, think about just exposure to what's possible when so social media, just like I think I saw. What was it, 2007 that Facebook was like, or 2006?
Yeah, around then.
When we started getting onto it. But like that, our exposure was what the schools would tell us, they would tell us what's possible. And well, I'd be like, I don't fit any of those molds, so I might as well just not pay attention and we'll figure it out later. I always kind of knew I was leaning towards entrepreneurship in some way, like always wanted my own thing. But like, it wasn't like, a popular option in school. At all.
No.
Yeah.
This episode of Built to Last is brought to you by Ironhouse Pro, your behind-the-scenes partner in building organizations designed to thrive. We specialize in solving the big challenges, the small annoyances, and everything in between. So while you're out there dreaming big, we're here making sure your systems, processes, and people are ready for tomorrow. Ironhouse Pro, driven to create lasting organizations. Learn more at ironhousepro.com.
So I want to adjust the topic a little bit, and it segues nicely here. I'm really geeky around the technician entrepreneur. That was my
Okay.
first thing. So that was I was a food guy who opened a food business. My first business was all in food and kitchens and catering. I built to sell, not built to sell. The E-Myth is all about the pie maker. And you are a recruiter who started a recruiting business. And so from your own journey, when did you first identify as more entrepreneur than recruiter, or do you?
I think I am more entrepreneur and recruiter at this point. Like I said, I love recruitment, but I also love problem solving. And I think that has allowed me to lean more into, oh, I'm more of an entrepreneur because a million ideas, a million possibilities, all the things that I can help with over and above finding the talent. Like
Mm-hmm.
I can find, I mean, maybe not in the trades because we've talked about that, but I know that I can find the right person that's going to have the right skills and abilities and fit with your company and fit with your culture. But I also want to be able to say, like, how do we create something really great for your organization that isn't cookie cutter to someone else's? And I think you need to be able to have those ideas. That's not the technician piece, that's the entrepreneurial piece.
And so maybe, and there might be nothing here, but I used to have my own podcast that I just did entrepreneurial stories of people when they went through this. And I'm just wondering, when you started, 2020, right before COVID or during the beginnings of COVID, when you switched to, single shingle to start, you're doing your own thing and you're going to start growing it. And I assume at some point earlier or later you incorporated and then you hired and you started putting in some systems. And
Hmm.
when did did you ever find yourself like realizing that it was a new trade, like the business side? A lot of people I just talk to, like they so confident in the work they deliver that they either forget or don't follow or end up having to clean up some sins of the past on the business side. And you're
Yeah.
now ready, or it sounds like you're ready for scale. You've got some foundations in place, and that is usually a 4-year overnight success. Any big
Right.
learnings or thoughts for others on that journey?
Yeah, I think the biggest learning for me is that one, I can't do it all because I don't know how to do it all. Like I'm a great recruiter and I feel very confident saying that. I'm not a great accountant. I've branded my LinkedIn well, but I don't know that that really is marketing, right? So I think you have to be able to be very self-aware and almost, vulnerable to the fact of like, as an entrepreneur, you do have to wear all of the hats at some point, and then you have to go, what am I really not good at? And how do I then shift that? Because sometimes it's outsourcing or sometimes it's hiring. I think the biggest learning lesson for me has been just because you're great at one thing doesn't mean you're good at another, and that you have to be able to ask for help or even just like have someone to have those conversations with, because you can have a lot of sleepless nights as you're trying to go from the next level to the next level, because again it's probably something where like keep going, keep going, keep going, even if you're great where you're at. There's a lot of sleepless nights around like, can I do this? And I might be really qualified as the recruiter because I've got 17 years experience, but that doesn't mean I've got 17 years of building a business.
Mm.
And so am I dropping the ball? Am I failing my team? Like, so those things do happen. And I think just leaning into, I don't believe in failure or perfection as really like a thing, because I know I'm never going to be perfect. And I know I'm not like failure doesn't mean I suck. It just means I have to go in a different direction. And I think if you're an entrepreneur, you have to be okay with you're not going to be either one of those things, and you're not going to be able to do all of the things. You are going to have to ask for help or guidance from somebody.
4 years in business, give or take.
Yeah.
I'd like to make me feel good and take just 2 seconds to think about this. Absolute proudest moment so far.
Ooh. Um, I would say that it's being able to create employment for other people. So I have a team like that. I did not ever imagine it would be more than single shingle. Like it was like, I'm just going to do this. I want to replace my income from my
Mm.
salary at Manulife,
Self-fulfilled.
right? I just wanted to be on my own. I didn't want
Mm.
anyone else to be like, hey, guess what? You're not going to do this. So I think the fact that I've been able to create sustainable employment within the community for the team that I have and hopefully other team members in the future. But I also think that is also tied to like I know that I'm making impact in either someone's organization by what we're trying to help them do, or I'm impacting someone to get them either out of a career or really out of their own way of doing something that they don't like. And I can actually see the transformation as they happen. And so I feel like really proud to have like a small part in somebody's journey.
Nice.
Great.
Yeah.
Nice.
I've asked the last three or four. I'm terrible
Yeah.
at stealing time here, Colby. You can. I'll let you in.
Yeah, no, all good. I got a couple of questions, or a couple of a point and a question maybe.
Also, Jen, you're allowed to ask questions. This is a
No,
two-way conversation.
no,
I
it's
love
not.
being in the hot seat. It's totally fun.
I know, but we're so like. Here's the thing: is we're really coming at you because we're genuinely curious, and oh, maybe that's a problem.
No.
But stop at any point if you want to ask us questions. But I do. You mentioned something earlier about that whether you're the difference between the technician and the entrepreneur, and I have struggled with this a lot. And because it seemed like I was always trying to find the perfect industry or the perfect business to build that I'd be excited about. And it was actually an EO member, Martin Balcom, who's a friend of ours. He said to me one time something I'll never forget. And it actually, it changed the way I'm thinking about business now. He said simply, I just want to build cool shit and see it work. And that resonated with me more than I want to start this type of business or this type of business. Like I actually like to see, best practices and all the creativity around, making that thing work gets me more excited than the actual business itself.
Yep.
Now more than ever, which is just an interesting thing that he just like when he said it, it just kind of like my head kind of tilted and I was like, oh, I think that's what I like, just to see stuff work and grow and build community around it. And anyway, yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree with that because I think one of the really cool things about being an entrepreneur, especially if your business is service based, I mean, and product based as well, but I think with service based, you're getting to have so many conversations with levels of leaders or business owners and like seeing it through their lens. That was one of the things that always interested me about having a business was like, and when I loved recruitment at the beginning and agency world is you were always learning about what people were creating or building and or if they had to pivot, what did that look like? So there was just so much independent creativity that I don't think you get from a 9 to 5. And I know not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, and that's fantastic. You do you and be happy. But for me, it is being able to be like, I want to learn about your business. I want to know what works. I want to know why you're doing what you're doing. And then there's so like, that's where I say, like, that's indirect mentorship, right? Just those conversations, because you're going to learn from really great people, like, not because you've sought them out to be a mentor, but because you've had a conversation, which is probably a more authentic, transparent conversation. And the really good stuff is in that.
Yeah. Often we get paid to learn, and it's great.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like,
I mean, it's hard to sell it exactly that way, but it's still.
So the next question's a little different. We talked about it, or we brushed over it earlier. Is how are you seeing AI affect the hiring process right now? And is that not is that? I imagine it's very disruptive and annoying. Can you tell me about your experience with it?
yeah, I think it's only annoying because like we need it like we need it and we should lean into it but we shouldn't rely on it, right? And I think that there are certain things that obviously AI is going to be able to replace. I think there are things that it is definitely going to elevate, but I think when it comes to certain parts of business, so like employer brand, candidate experience, all of those things, it still needs a human element because we're dealing with people, right? And so I've had people who are like, "Oh, I hear, Jen, I did my resume in Chat GPT," and I'm just like, "Okay, but did you go back and look at it and make sure that it is actually a reflection of you?"
Yeah.
Because the three of us could have the same three backgrounds. It could potentially spit out the same three resumes because we don't know that what it says to you and says to me are the same or different. And so what I've said to people is lean into it for sure, right? Like if you have to write a cover letter and you're not sure where to start, ask it for some prompts, which is no different than using Google or before when we had encyclopedias way back in the day. Like you looked for the information as a tool and a resource, but you didn't copy it, right? So I think the frustration part comes from me on the human side of they're just relying on it and like, okay, now I'm for sure getting the job. No, you're not. We still need human pieces. I also think specifically when it comes to recruitment, there will be ways that AI can elevate certain pieces of the hiring process, but I still do not think it can replicate the conversation that has to happen in an interview between two people, right? And like, or three people in the room. Because when we had the pandemic, a lot of people, we all operated like this. We were on screens. And then you know that when you got back to those in-person other meetings, interviews, or whatever, the energy is different. And I think if we think that we're going to lean into AI and it's going to replace all that, like you're still going to need a recruiter because you're still, or an HR team or whatever, like you still have to have that. So the biggest frustration I have is not with AI itself. It's the fact that we as humans are like, oh, thank God, now I don't have to like put the work in. Yes, you do. Like you still need to.
Mhm.
Same as when the internet first came, everyone's like, oh my God, like the world's going to blow up and it's going to end in 1999 because the internet's taken over. It's a tool and a resource. It's not the be all to end all. So I would say don't lean into that, or don't rely on it, but lean into it and it can make a huge difference. It'll save you time.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I have seen it from the different lens of it breaking a bunch of organizations' processes.
Yep.
And if they're not keeping up to speed, like a lot, like we work with a lot of traditional companies, and they have strong, dependable, have worked in the past hiring processes that had like keywords and the way they respond and set questions and those multiple, often too many steps in the hiring process. But the people at the senior level aren't paying attention to the tools that are becoming more useful. They're
Mhm.
avoiding ChatGPT even for personal use or what have you. The example, I have a really good friend who works for provincial government, which has not only older, more mature processes, but also has anti-patronage processes. So they had all these things so that you could point to why they were not hired, so nobody could give a job to a friend. And so like scanning for keywords and usage and all those things, and they're completely stalled. It's frozen their hiring because all of the people who know they use the tools are suddenly coming in perfect candidate.
Right.
And they were not allowing human decision making in the hiring process because of the patronage rules. People weren't allowed to make a judgment call. And so now they're having to rethink a lot. And I think that's an interesting problem
Hmm.
to play with.
Well, because because if you think about it, technology is supposed to help us make our lives more efficient, right?
Mm,
But if it does something like this, it completely slows down the process if it doesn't completely break it, right?
yeah.
And so I think from that perspective, we did a project when I worked for Manulife, and it was around like how we have certain biases that we don't even realize that we have. And so what they did is they would say, okay, I'm going to come to you and these are two resumes. You're going to look at it and go, oh, this person went to the same chef school that I did. So we're totally interviewing him because we would never
Mm,
interview someone from that school. Like it's we were starting to see all these like based on the neighborhood that you lived in, where you went to school, like all of these different things. And there's people who still put on their resume all of their hobbies and what they do on a
mm,
Saturday and all of these things. So the biases were created. And then when we removed key identifiers and put it in
yeah.
front of the same two resumes again, they were often choosing the other resume. But
Yeah.
it really did slow down a global hiring process to go, do we pull all of this information off? But it's then how do you adapt to the change? Because it's
Yeah.
not going away,
No, no.
right? But if you have, and most companies do, if you have an outdated, archaic, cumbersome hiring process, something like AI is really going to grind you to a halt. And if you're not agile and adaptable, then that's on you. Because on the flip side, if you're saying, is there benefit to using some of those pieces? 100%. Where do we modify to become modernized? And then
Yeah.
that will allow us to make better hiring decisions. But I would hate to see a day where an interview happens and the decision is made by a non-human through technology, because I think that's going to be more costly than anything, and I don't think that's using the technology to its best ability.
To be honest, what I'm excited is like specifically with what I know, and it's hearsay and second hearing, all that fun stuff at the provincial government in New Brunswick, is that it's going to force them to more humanize their process because they had
Yeah.
already removed. You weren't allowed to submit a resume. You had to put it in text boxes so that they remove bias, and the decision had to be made by scored metrics and keywords, not
Yeah, the
like so. Like
person.
it's going to force them to have a human more involved. I just think it's an interesting, depending on your organization, how it's disrupting.
Yeah, and I do think we need to like I think this is the one thing that needs to stay humanized because we're people, right? Like we aren't the robot, right? So we need
Yeah,
to be able to, and you want good people in your organization. Unless it like again, people are like, "Oh, robots are going to take over the world in 20 years or 30 years." And in some capacities, yeah, they probably will. But when it comes to certain roles, that is always going to be human. So if you take the human element out of it, you are not going to retain people. Like the turnover and the toxic work environment is going to be so much greater because I do think going into 2025 and probably the next 5 years, companies are going to be looking more of like, do they fit with our culture and can we train them versus they've got the skills we need. We don't care if they have a personality or they fit with us. We'll figure it out.
Totally.
It's flipping and AI can't help that.
No.
They can help maybe
Well,
processes.
that being said, like we've found a lot of luck in hiring from the service industry and people that are managing bars
Hmm.
or working as a bartender or I was
Service industry with some ambition. It's just
yeah
like a,
Yeah,
yeah
a hundred
totally
percent. But
and
did I tell you, Colby, the McDonald thing? And you're like, wait, stop, I gotta write that
yeah
down.
I forgot to I didn't tell anybody else that hold on yes
So again, when you say service industry and we think about like customer service, retail, working in the bars, working in restaurants, hotels, whatever, and having that ambition, there are certain
yeah.
skills that you can't teach. And sometimes it's the people skill. And I said to Colby when we were having like, I think a 3 hour riff session, it was only supposed to be 45 minutes, but it was, if I see someone who has a resume and they have 2 years or more at McDonald's, I can guarantee that I could hire them sight unseen and that they will be successful. And whether that's because McDonald's follows the E-Myth or whether that's because they grind out certain levels of the work that they do and they've kind of shown up day after day and they've built some resilience. But I have never, ever, ever in my life had a negative hire from someone who has come from that environment.
So I have the exact same rule. Did we get that from somewhere? Because I've never been able to attribute it.
what
Is it maybe
The
from E-Myth, you
McDonald's
think?
rule.
No,
I've never heard you say that, but Jen was the first person to say that, and then 2 weeks later,
Yeah.
somebody said it to me again. Um,
We'll
and it went,
Google it. I think I must be stealing it from somewhere because I was like, I've said that so many times.
and
um,
Lindsay on my team, who's the first person I hired. So I'm like at that point, 12 months in, I'm working all the time. And my husband and I we're at Costco to pick out flooring. And he was like, you're literally not paying attention. It was like a Friday night. And I'm like, I'm working. I've got stuff to do. And he's like, Jen, he's like, I think it's time to hire somebody. And I was like, I don't know. And then I was like, I talked to this girl who found me on Instagram. She was like, we used to be an assistant manager at this restaurant. So a really good restaurant here in Halifax. I've moved outside the city. I don't think I want to do hospitality. I don't know what to do. And I've been following along. So I had a conversation with her. And then I said to my husband, John, that night after we had the little argument in Costco, like, you just pick the floor because I'm over here doing work and I'm trying to build this business. And I was like, I think I want to hire the girl from Instagram. And he's like, are you kidding me? But so I had a conversation with her. I'm like, I don't have a job description. I don't know, but I just feel like, and I mapped it out over the weekend and I sent it to her. And she's currently on maternity leave, but she was my first hire and she's been with me that whole time. And the hospitality, like she's adaptable. She can deal with multiple personalities. She can problem solve and figure out solutions. It's made her a killer recruiter because recruitment, even though it falls under the HR bucket, is really sales and marketing.
Yeah, totally.
yeah, and like I grew up in playing music in the bars and stuff, and that was kind of my first gig, and just being able to deal with drunk people,
Right.
de-escalate situations, like
Right.
you
Put on
know,
a positive face when you're not feeling positive. Like, how do you mark that
yeah,
down?
Yeah. Wait, and how do you say that in an interview? And for Lindsay, she was at a fairly high level restaurant that you also know when people are coming in with money, their expectations are higher. Like if you're paying like $100 for a plate of food, you have an expectation that it's going to be cooked the way you wanted and served on time, whatever. So de-escalating that is as difficult as dealing with the drunk person. I don't care what anyone says, maybe even
yeah,
harder. Right? Because their expectations are so different. And I think if you are someone in hospitality or retail or customer service and you're on that front line, you have so many transferable skills that you need to get really clear on because it can catapult your career to the next level
Yeah.
without you realizing it.
Yeah. Communications is the one skill that amplifies all others. And it's just like, how do you write that down?
Yeah, and so we work with people where I'll say like communication is obviously verbal and it's nonverbal, but it's also your tone and delivery, right?
Yeah.
Because you can be 100% right on something, but if you're communicating it and you're being like a bit of a dink, I'm not listening to you. And neither other people. And so, how do you communicate that? You really have to be able to get in front of someone because resumes
Yeah.
technically don't. But if you start looking at, like, well, I'm really interested in what Levi's doing, and you start following LinkedIn, you're going to see your communication style, so
Yeah.
it's going to give me more of a reason to reach out to you than if I just have the resume.
I'm afraid to have you look at it because I'm really proud of it. But our job descriptions have a bunch of sections written. They're written specifically that they never mention years of experience or education requirements.
Okay.
And they have like aptitude statements and what would have to be true for you to enjoy work. Anyway, it's been iterated and stuff. So someday maybe we'll let you see it because I'm afraid you'll tear it apart. It's close. But where I got here, there's a line of like,
we won't do it live.
Yeah, we won't do it
We
live.
should do it live. That would be so fun.
Wouldn't it?
I do
I'm
it with
game.
LinkedIn profiles, and people are like, "Oh my god, I'm so sorry."
Yeah, I've done that too. But the one that specifically resonated is that like, I'm going to paraphrase it a bit, but it's enough life experience that you can communicate with intended tone and purpose. And it's just written as like, there's 1,000 ways for you to get there. And there's a couple lines in there. It's like, it just come out through action. Like I didn't create all of it. It's just, we kept the good and got rid of the bad, but it's similar to you. You mentioned you don't have a degree. My mother doesn't have a degree and hit a ceiling at a bunch of big companies and had to leave and found a bigger role because she doesn't have an undergrad. She has 30 years of project management experience.
Yeah,
Like,
and I'm gonna say, like, am I allowed to swear? You
yeah,
have to beep it out. I'm going to say that really effing pisses me off because
yeah,
there are a couple of key organizations that are large organizations that
yeah,
they will go, you have 25 or 30 years of experience, but because you don't have the degree, we're not even going to interview. And it's like, you know what I would have learned 25 years ago in that degree is completely irrelevant in today's world. Why would you not like
yeah,
interview me and then make me take a certificate as part of my professional development? Like, why would you overlook talent
yeah,
because of, and someone said, and we have the debate around education because I don't have it. So it's not that I don't see the value in it because I do, but it has not slowed me down. Right. So I have to say, like, let's look at it from a lens of if it didn't slow me down, what were the things that I was able to attribute? I do think my first couple of jobs were because I did French immersion in school. So I was considered bilingual, and that's a hot commodity in Atlantic, Canada, if someone can speak two languages.
we,
Right. Oui, right. But it's like, the piece of paper shows you like that you've got the knowledge, but if you can't implement the knowledge to what the organization needs, or you don't even know how to do the hands-on experience, it doesn't carry the weight. And again, didn't have a degree. I was working for an organization that I'm reviewing resumes for positions that were in the contact center starting at this time just under $40,000 a year. And I had people applying with MBAs for this contact center position that they wouldn't even be making $40,000. And I had a grade 11 education and my total compensation was 80. So how does that make sense?
yeah,
Right? There was a
yeah,
lot I struggled with at that time because it's like they should be in my seat and I should be applying for that job because I don't have what people would anticipate that I
yeah.
should to be successful. So I think when you come up against a ceiling, whether it's your mom or someone else, it's like, organizations have to stop being stuck in the 90s. Like that's it.
Well, and I'm a big believer in words. And to be honest, the word, they don't have to. They should, because somebody will.
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody's going to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody will do it. Yeah, absolutely. It's weird to kind of like our future is like, again, everything is, we did that thing, Colby, last year at the retreat where the guy was saying like the way time, it just keeps getting faster and faster and
Yeah.
faster, right? And it's like, it's true. So like, why are we keeping our healthcare and our education and our careers and all these stuff in a time that like literally can never exist again? It's not humanly possible because of the way that time like just keeps accelerating and ramping up and all these new things keep coming at us.
Yeah. Do we have more time? Or are we
I'm,
full?
I mean,
I
I'm
don't.
here.
No, we're good.
I'll do whatever. He froze.
He
What happened?
froze. That was a good segue, Levi.
We have more time and he's gone.
Yeah, really good segue. I'm sure he'll come back. Maybe he won't. I don't know.
Let's talk guitar keys or drum keys and all the things.
Yeah, exactly. Any questions from your perspective? Anything you're curious about?
I mean, I think for me, I'm really interested to know that like when you guys are either deciding on a project that you would take on or that you're going to hire someone else or whatever that looks like, how do you guys decide if it's a client that's a fit for you? And then how do you decide how to go find that individual that's going to work with you? Kobe's like, thank God Levi's back. He'll answer it.
Yeah.
I'm hearing you guys fine. I never blipped. I have no idea what's going on.
So we're in a bit of an interesting situation because we are not the same company we were last year, and we're certainly not the same company we were the year before. So
Yeah, before that, we were two companies.
yeah, before that we were two companies.
Right.
So I guess we're trying to figure out what normal feels like now, and like developing, taking those next steps and developing those processes, and we're very clear or clearer on our ideal client and the type of people that we're going to be looking for, and we've got some strategy around that, but it has changed drastically
And there's
over.
also three owners.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's future wants and there's cash flow today. So there's
Yeah.
lots of competing things there.
Yeah.
Which no
Um,
one tells you or teaches you when you're like, hey, I think I want to start a business.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? Did you
100%.
guys say yes to everything at the beginning?
Oh God,
Yeah.
yeah, with a big smile,
Yeah. And then you're like, what am I doing?
and even still, like
and some of it's a bit bittersweet though. The reasons I started this business are pretty closely tied to things we can no longer do because we've priced ourselves outside of the market.
yes,
Ooh. So how do
And
you adapt to
so,
that? You just go in a different direction, or are you
no,
like,
I made peace with it with doing a little bit more volunteering, and I work with agencies that allow me to come in from an educational perspective because
okay,
not everybody should afford our services, but everybody's going to be affected by the stuff we're dealing with. So, like speaking at conferences, I derive a lot of joy from speaking and workshops, and but like our business needs projects that, and if we don't want to, we've made a commitment to not work with any company that we're fixing or that's in crisis or that our bill might affect payroll. Like we're
right?
not fixers. We're helping them build. We're not fixing. And so that's yeah. So it's bittersweet. I wrestled with it quite a bit. The original value prop at the very, very beginning was let's help David against Goliath.
hmm.
Right.
And I have no religious background at all. It just everybody understood it.
But that's still true. Like we're very excited about helping the organizations, move into the future, and especially
Hmm.
with, maybe folks that are dealing with succession planning, and we can really amplify a company and help them become more scalable or less dependent on those key
Yeah.
individuals.
Okay.
When it
But
comes to the hiring process, though, like we're more curious and interested in, I've kind of alluded to it before, is like their communication skills, and we're hiring less of the technician and more of the soft skills, and then just putting them in the Ironhouse ecosystem, and the ability to lead meetings and lead conversations is more valuable to us than
they
the
have to be tech adaptive or tolerant.
sure.
We use a lot of tools and software. Like
Mm.
the so I think I missed some of your question earlier, but like our target, I think is what you're asking, like who we're trying to do work for.
Yeah, because like, how do you decide like this is not we're gonna run because this is not gonna be a fit for us, or like this really aligns to who we are and what we want to be doing?
And
So
then
I
how we
think there
find
are
the
some.
people and how we find the people to fill that work as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, I think there are some global, like all true, although we're still like a little unfocused as because we're not really industry specific. We get a lot of work through referral, but there has to be, well, you mentioned earlier, and so I wanted to bring it up. There has to be a certain amount of self awareness and vulnerability, and it has to come from the top. If those
Okay.
things aren't true, there's just no chance that that project's going to be good on either side. And even we're doing large organizations or like associations or government, there has to be a key decision maker who is pretty much emotionally invested in this working. I think we've also been able to tie every project that's good and we want to do more of to there's a certain amount of they want the organization to depend less on key people. They
Okay.
want, and not because they want to replace, but they don't want people to like when they leave the whole company's in shambles. They don't want the onboarding to be so master to apprentice. They want it to work and people be able to take time off when they're off and unplug at 5 p.m. And that takes systems and process and culture and pieces. So there's been a common element, and the business owner is a classic example. I want to be able to delegate more and remove myself as a linchpin, and I don't want to be the one who's on the phone, the built to sell type model. So independence from people from business, not removing the human, but the dependence. It's not absolutely necessary for heroic delivery all the time. And self-awareness and humility, maybe not humility, self-awareness and vulnerability are global truths.
Are you seeing a lot of people use the terminology entrepreneurial?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think a lot of success can come from that because a lot of people don't want to start their own business, but they want to operate in their role as though they have that responsibility. Because I think that that fuels them in a way of, I don't have to take the risk.
Yeah. Yeah.
I,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, I was wondering if I wanted, when I do these conversations, I want to make sure we have a few, because I feel like we've been selfishly scratching our own itches because I'm enjoying the conversation. And I'm just like, what would be interesting for somebody to take away? And I would love your thoughts um, on, we talked about employer of choice, employer brand, what makes you stand out as employer. If you had to force rank kind of the top big 5 things that you should be thinking about because I understand a lot of things underneath that umbrella.
Right.
What are actionable things that an employer should be looking at, or whether they're self-reflecting, whether they're a good employer brand or not?
This episode of Built to Last is brought to you by Iron House Pro, your behind-the-scenes partner in building organizations designed to thrive. We specialize in solving the big challenges, the small annoyances, and everything in between. So while you're out there dreaming big, we're here making sure your systems, processes, and people are ready for tomorrow. Iron House Pro, driven to create lasting organizations. Learn more at ironhousepro.com.
What's the big ones?
I think leadership, but I think it, and again, we need to drill that further down. But I think like, is your leadership approachable? Like, are they open to like, again, it's hard to be a leader in a role and then try to like develop yourself and move the products forward and deliver and all the things, but then also be able to lean into your team. So I think approachable leadership is really, really key. I think that comes down to communication, right? You're not going to approach somebody who's not going to be there. So I think leadership is like, how do you then demonstrate the way your leadership operates at, in terms of how they deliver the projects, but like how they support the team and how they elevate people. And not everyone is meant to climb a corporate ladder, and that's totally fine. But how do they help champion the people that do want that? Because we need all of that in organizations. And so I like, how do you define leadership? And then how can, like, let's have organizations show that. So I think leadership is important and the ability to elevate and champion from within. And I think because we are now in a world where so many people want flexibility, work-life balance, like I want to work remote, I want to work hybrid, I think the employer needs to get really clear on not just using that as either a buzzword or, what does hybrid mean? You might have an expectation that that means that you're in the office 3 days a week, and someone else may mean it's only you have to come in once a month. So, like, how do you define what that actually means so that you can communicate that? The worst thing for anyone going through the interview process, whether it's me as a recruiter, you as an organization, or the candidate, is if I think that it means X and you think that it means Y, and then you lose a really great candidate because it wasn't effectively communicated, right? I personally would not go back into the corporate world where I had to work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and I had to be at my desk all the time. Like that would not work for me. Would I go back in 2 days a week? Yes. But when I worked for Manulife, I was doing work from home before it was even a thing because I had clients on the West Coast. So I had to adjust and adapt. I went in Mondays every month, like every week. Sorry, I went in Mondays. So I think we need to get really clear on what is flexible work environment. What does that mean? And one thing that I learned through EO that I absolutely love and I think is also disruptive is the concept of unlimited vacation. Right. And the first time I saw it, so we have a client that is part of EO. And when we got their benefits package, I was like, oh my God, they have the best benefit package of anyone I've ever seen ever. And I was like, unlimited vacation. And a lot of people are like, how is that even possible? And it's like, well, if you're doing your job, you can't take 6 months of the year off, right? If you're performing and you decide that you're going to take every Friday off, no one's going to say anything. And I think when we start to lean into trust and the vulnerability piece of we've hired the right people, they're delivering because they've got the tools, resources, systems, and structures and experience, you have the opportunity to be flexible inside of that. So I would like to see organizations again elevate the leadership and the teams that they have, but get really clear on the messaging of why is this a great place to work? And it's not because the company brand is well known, because there are so many companies whose brand is not well known. We're not all working for Coke and Nike and Gatorade and all of those things. We're working for companies that are a lot of times built off of someone else's idea. So how do we communicate that story so that the people are really aligning to your values?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're very big believers in the value driven, like, yeah.
We
Well, and I think it's really interesting because I think again back in the older days or the more traditional route, it was if you were applying for a position, you didn't care who the company was hiring. You just look for, is this the job they're hiring for? Okay, so they're hiring for an accountant, you apply. And you hope that they call you, like we said earlier. But today's world, if I'm an accountant and I volunteer and spend my time working with Mad Canada, I am not applying for a position at the Liquor Commission. It doesn't align to my values. Whereas 20 or 30 years ago, you didn't care because they gave you the job. And so I want organizations to like get clear on their values because I also want career seekers to understand what their personal values are so that we can align them.
Yeah.
And people don't know what their personal values are.
Yeah. Yeah. Still your choir.
Thank you.
yeah.
My
We
favorite setback moment, like I love it when you ask a question and somebody's like, huh.
Yeah.
It's my favorite. It's like crack for me. But the number one thing I said in my little personal career strategy sessions was always, you're going to spend more time with these employee, colleagues, employer than you spend with almost any other person in your life.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you want to consider that like a personal decision? Like wouldn't you want to take a stamp of your personal values and what you want? And anyway, and almost universally, nobody had ever thought about it.
Well, because it didn't matter before. So again,
Yeah,
we're still stuck in the mindset of like, well, personal
yeah,
values, why do I need to have them? I need the job, I need the paycheck, right?
yeah.
And now that's what I'm excited about for the younger generation is they might not know at 16 what their personal values are, but as time continues to evolve, they are going to know that because we all have a story, whether it's our own or someone else's, of a toxic boss, a toxic work environment, someone who didn't treat us right, or whatever that is. Life is way too short to spend
Mm,
any amount of time with someone that's going to make us feel that way because it erodes at our own confidence and our own abilities, right? Like we've talked
mm,
about this. And so I think it's really important that outside of what the organization's missions and values are, I think individually we need to focus on what are my
mm,
personal values and what is important to me. And then I think like it just starts to line up in a way that we would never have experienced before. And then we can make great decisions. I don't want to work with someone
mm.
who's angry all the time. And I don't want to work. I have people on my team and I'm like, are you still working? It's 10 o'clock at night. Like, shut it down. And I know
Yeah,
that at certain times projects require that. But I also don't want someone who's like, well, Jen took Friday off to take your daughter to Taylor Swift. Like, she shouldn't have done that. Well, no, my family is the most important thing to me. So at the
yeah,
end of the day, I want people who like those
yeah.
values align with them too.
Yeah, we live in, I guess we have an unlimited vacation policy. We don't
Ah,
market it. It's not in the job posting.
until the
It's marketed
podcast.
now.
Yeah, until the
Yeah,
podcast hits
still a
but
podcast.
but
Nobody will ever,
it's
like, if they do find that, they're hired. If they go through that level of due diligence of the process, that's the kind
Totally.
of problem solver I want.
well,
Yeah.
I told so we have we're hiring for the same client that has the unlimited vacation, and the recruiter on my team now that is helping, she was not with us when we first started hiring for them. So I was like, "Here's their benefits package," da da da, and she was like, "Unlimited vacation," and I was like, "Yeah, but you know what? If you were like." Not that she isn't, but I'm like, if you're closing the roles that you need to close and the clients are happy and the candidates are happy and all of the things, and if you come to me and be like, Jen, I need Fridays off or I want to take a long, like you have at it. Do I want you to go to Australia for 6 months? Probably not.
Yeah.
But it's not something that gets taken advantage of. And this client, when I asked them about it, they said that on average, people are still only taking 3 to 4 weeks, even though they have unlimited. So and if it's abused, you're not going to be successful anyway.
Some of these policies and like getting into compensation, like I could have a whole separate podcast on each specific one. I know we learned a lot on unlimited vacations, and what we ended up having to do is that we had to institute kind of forcing mechanisms. So we shut down the company for 2 weeks of the holidays,
We do
so
too.
nobody works.
Yep.
And then we looked at all the long weekends across the year, and we actually pre-assigned working with them which long weekends they're going to add a day or two to create those extra long weekends. And
Nice.
so they might change them or rotate them, but everybody, two people, I think right now, every normal stat long weekend has an extra long weekend. So like we can plot out that even if you do not take a vacation day, you will have had around that 3.5, 4 week range.
Hmm.
But on the other side, we had somebody who had, was good at taking the time when she wanted the time, and then she got sick. And unlimited vacation policy is kind of also unlimited sick policy. And it
Ah,
happened, and it was like, and we were, totally. It just was like, how do we? But it was done a month or two later. The conversation was, all right, now trusted person, you know us, you know why we're doing it, you believe in it. Can you update our handbook on the policy you think we should do to address that
Yeah.
situation in
Right.
the future?
What do you think we should do? Because we
Because it
didn't
got a
know.
little dicey eventually. Like it's
So when you so and not that I am by any means an HR expert, but when you look at like is your is the unlimited vacation is this is your vacation sick time or do you have separate for that?
so we don't separate it. We just have
Uh,
policies around how you notify, record, and plan.
okay.
But it was just because what we tried to do is once we made that move is we wanted to minimize the tracking.
Right.
And the approval process and so like we happy to go into the weeds on it, but there isn't two separate pools in our company. It's
Okay.
one pool of everybody's kind of paid a salary and we just have to make sure work is managed. Lots of policies, but no separate pools.
Well, and with the right people that are like again right fit, they've got the right experience, they've
And
got
a
the right
dozen people, right? It's not like
right.
we're dozens or hundreds.
No, but at the same time, the dozen that you have are essentially setting the foundation for the dozens that come,
Yeah.
right? Right.
Yeah.
And you don't want it taken advantage of, but I think, like again, like we do half day Friday all year round. It's not just a summer thing. Like we're done by 1:30. But I can guarantee you that when I get off of this call, there will be Slack messages because someone has worked past 1:30. At the same time, again, same with holidays. We close down between, December, whatever the way the calendar lines up and until January. But like my team this year, I think they still have half their vacation in there. So it's like if they're delivering on what they're
Yeah.
doing, the flexibility is for sure there. If you're not, you probably don't want to take time off anyway, because then you're going to be worried like what that outcome is going to be.
Yeah.
Because that's where holes get identified. Is if someone's not doing the work and they're taking time off, you're very quickly going to know they're not doing the work.
Yeah, we had to shore up a lot of that tracking of
Yeah.
what's happening. Yeah. It's a fascinating discussion, and it also makes us easier. I think our route has been to create a culture strong enough that somebody they would have peer friction before we would have to go top down friction. Like I
Hmm.
think the culture is strong enough now where people would self select out, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And
Totally.
isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
we're big investors in culture. Like culture, we've even had a couple projects where resorting company culture has had to be part of the modernization plan. And
Nice.
it's like training, it's personality tests, it's new vocabulary, it's values, it's meeting structure, it's a lot of different principles under that hood.
And
That's amazing.
Jen, we used to have a small office in Moncton, we had an office in Miramichi, and then COVID happened, and we just decided that we're going full virtual, and we don't have, I don't think, more than two people in one city or province or whatever. I don't know. There's people I still haven't seen in person, so
Which is wild. You're the only one who hasn't met everybody.
yeah, it's wild. But what we did is we started playing games every Wednesday.
Mandatory fun time.
It's mandatory fun time for the entire team, and we all get on Zoom and we play we got 3 or 4 or 5 games that we kind of rotate through, and it was like it felt a little forced at first, and we didn't, people didn't want to spend extra time doing it, and now it's like really competitive and quite hilarious, and a lot of swearing and calling each other out, and
We have employees who we had to let go come back to it.
yes,
Really?
they come back to games.
That's been the test for us. Is like there was role changes and work changes, and for whatever reason, we had to part ways, and we found a way to do like contract work, and I think we've had 3 who are no longer with us who have come back in.
Yeah,
For social
and
time.
students that we had for the summer or whatever, they'll come back every
Yeah.
once in a while and sit with us, and
That's
and
awesome.
yeah, it's hilarious. It's
See, and
hilarious.
it's just little things like that, right? Like it again, it just gives everybody the opportunity to just kind of also chill, right? And be like, okay, now we get to be ourselves, and like I think good things come out of that.
Yeah.
Mm, yeah.
I have one more question, and then I'm going to close down my questions, or I'll just go forever. It came up a little earlier: wage disparity over region. I'm starting to use like tough luck. You're going to have to deal with it. Life's not fair. But I was wondering if you had any other type of response to the companies who are based in Atlantic Canada, used to a lower wage, and now are hybrid or virtual, and have a higher wage range in different regions, and how they're dealing with that.
I mean, the reality is that you I think what we need to do is I think we need to be like, regardless of where the city you live in, everything's expensive now. Like that's the reality of the world. If you had told me that the house that I live in now would triple in value over the last 10 years, I would think that that's insane, and know that like it has a house value that you could find, probably not a great house in Ontario, but it still would have that price point. So I think organizations can't lean into that being the reason they don't pay well. Right. So it'd be like, oh, well, it's Nova Scotia, so that's just what it is. Or it's New Brunswick and we're not paying Toronto salaries. But at the end of the day, you're also expecting people to show up with the skill set like they came out of Toronto, right? And so I think that organizations hide behind it a little bit because again, like of where you can save money, but at the same time, if you attract the right people, you hire them properly, you can retain them. That extra $10,000, which is usually what we see the range being, like over region to region, you're going to make that back tenfold. If you keep that person in the role for 2 years, you have made back that $10,000 difference. Like 100% you have. And like I see it really often because, or I have people that are like, well, I just moved back from Toronto and I need to make $80,000 a year. And it's like, okay, well, that's great. But that doesn't mean the organization is going to give you that. So again, we have organizations that are frustrated with trying to hire and pay competitively, fairly, whatever. Then we have candidates that are like, well, I want to be paid this, give me all the unlimited vacation, whatever. And they just keep getting further and further apart when the reality is, if we bring it back to grassroots and we reestablish what is important in current day, nobody's going to have to give all. Like there is compromise in the middle, and you're going to have happier people, right? And at the end of the day, regardless of who's wanting the extra 10,000, whether it's like the company doesn't want to pay it or the career seeker that's trying to negotiate the offer does, $10,000 is not a lot of extra money when you spread it out over a year, right? And I've said, oh, he's gone. Is he back? He's like, I don't know. Right? But I've had people that are like, I need that extra 5,000. I'm like, that's $20 a paycheck. So are you going to let go all of the opportunity for $20, or are we going to like get in and negotiate, like come back to the table and show what you did in 6 months?
Yeah.
$10,000 is not a lot spread over 26 days.
No, no. Anytime I talk to anybody that has gotten that raise, they're like, "Oh, we don't feel it as much as we thought we would anyway."
No, you really
Yeah,
don't. Like, I think for it to be a really significant, like, okay, this feels better, it's probably closer to a $25,000
I
raise. And
agree.
those are not, I mean, they do happen, but they're not going to happen as often as we like. So I wouldn't haggle over the 10 on either side.
Yeah.
No, I think our direction is that we keep wrestling with is the shift to hybrid compensation, which is
Well, I mean, I think so for example, on my team, my recruiters are paid a base salary, which in the recruitment industry, usually it's not. Like there might be a small base salary, but it's usually like a draw against future commission, whatever. But I've often said, like, you get a base salary, which is not industry standard. You do get commission, but also keep in mind that you can work from home. You could really work from anywhere. Like, I wouldn't say, like, no, you couldn't. I mean, time zones might factor in, like, if for client deliverables. But at the end of the day, the benefit of hybrid is that like you don't have the commute. If you're like an early morning person and your kid, you want to work from 5 to noon because like you don't have kids or your kids are going to school at a certain point, whatever, I'm not going to stop you from doing that as long as the client is like, I can never get a hold of Jen after 12 o'clock. Again, different conversation around deliverables. But if it works for your lifestyle, the hybrid becomes the benefit. So there has to be a bit of a give and take on that. I would leave money on the table to be able to stay working hybrid remote than to be in an office full time. I worked for Target when they came to Atlanta, Canada. I went very briefly for like maybe 4 months, and it was work from home, and the salary was bananas. Like it was absolutely ridiculous the money that Target was paying. But their processes were so different to what we needed for Canadian retail that you could see the writing on the wall very, very quickly. That like I knew as we were hiring people to open stores that it wasn't going to work long term. And I went back to Manulife and was like, I made a mistake. Please take me back. And my boss was like, I can't give you the extra $60,000 a year that they're paying you. And I was like, I actually do not care. I want to do work that I like. I want to come. And again, I had a young family, but the money is not as important as the work that you're doing. So like trade off what's important to you. And on the hybrid piece, you might have to leave a bit of money on the table. But at the end of the day, if you're happier, it's going to come from somewhere else. Like you're going to promote, you'll be fine.
yeah,
You might promote faster.
yeah. We got to find a way of describing our total compensation package to include because I think we're. I mean, I've met a lot of people. I think we're the most work from anywhere friendly company I've met.
Oh yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, like our team leader, we call we replaced the word manager because for some reason we don't like it anymore. So she's our team leader, and she's in New Orleans this week. She was in Miami last
She
week,
could have
and
taken the vacation time. She's like, well, no, I just don't really want the pressure of everything bottling up. And I was like, I just get up a little earlier. I'm done by 2.
Yeah.
yeah, she went to Croatia for 2 months last year, and like we don't care. Like she's,
We
it's
have
like
learned some lessons around sometimes we're guilty. What's the uh, geographic arbitrage or something? Like there's a legal law we're breaking by
Oh,
having our employees work in countries not paying taxes in those countries.
yes,
Geopolitical arbitrage is I got this from a lawyer, and some countries enforce it better than others. So specifically France, we had a team member who was going to live there for 2 months, and it's absolutely like they're going to enforce it, and they do
oh my God.
audits. And U.S. is also pretty bad. Like if one of our team members goes to the U.S., we actually in the France one and probably in the U.S. they have to convert their relationship with us away from a permanent employee to a contractor, and we have a
yeah.
formula for what the compensation change happens because so people can
Oh my
change.
God.
Yeah, it was.
I
And
can't help there.
also
I can't help there ever.
Also, time zones maybe was one other thing where, like, if we're getting on 5 hour time differences, then
Yeah.
it does get a little bit tricky. But generally, the morale is boosted so much that that's even a possibility that it's just like it just keeps, you
Yeah.
know, gaining
We
more
kind of lay the law
buy-in.
is they have to work within our. I mean, they can deviate, a little bit here and there, but we have operating hours everybody
Yeah,
has to
there's
work.
core operating hours for sure,
Yeah,
right? Like, yeah, absolutely. I think one of the really cool things is that we have the adaptability and we do live in a world where those things are possible. And I think that, again, when we've been treated as employees, there's this thing like you have a manager who like or a supervisor and they're on you, but at the end of the day, we're all adults and we need to be treated as adults first and trusted, maybe not like blind trust, but we need to have enough trust in like if this is an individual who's worked for any amount of time, they're mature enough to know what their responsibilities are, you will find very quickly if someone's not doing their work. And then you just execute from there. But you can't just I had one client, and when I say micromanage, I don't even like whatever the word above micromanaging would be, she was. And like people were afraid to even take a bathroom break because they'd have to walk by her office and she'd want to know why they were not at their desk. And I was like, this is not a fit for me. Thank you very much. But like, they're adults. Like, we're talking, there were women in their 50s that were like, I can't go walk by her office because I'm afraid she's going to ask why I'm not at my desk, but I need to use the bathroom. Like, red
that's
flag, red flag, red flag, red flag, right?
That makes me want
Like,
to go watch Office Space again or something.
yeah,
yeah.
like we're adults, and until you give me a reason to think that I can't trust you, like lean into all these great things that organizations are now bringing to the table. And then if you don't, like I'm going to know really quickly, and then that's probably like not the adult conversation that you want to have because they're not comfortable to have either.
How
Also,
come?
the performance side of things too. Like I was talking to, I think it was Warren Rustand, that the guy that was the EO.
That I
Uh,
missed.
yeah, that you missed. You'll have to go to the next one with
I'm
him.
never going to live it down.
So he was telling me a story about his assistant wanting to move to Singapore or something like that, and it's like if you want to be in the sun and you're happier with a little extra vitamin D and you get cheaper living costs and you know you're going to perform better and there's this kind of understanding and trust and loyalty between the two of you already, then like it's a it's a bonus for both people.
Yeah, it is.
It's there is an element, and we have it in our job description. Someday we'll do a roast. It'll be great.
Okay.
But not everybody has the life maturity of knowing how to create boundaries. Like we have something in there around like have you had past experience working remotely or flexibly because do you know how to divide your bedroom from your work life?
Right.
So there's
That's
that like we've had more. I've had a few people probably before we merged actually, who had never worked remotely, and I had to guide them through that grown up moment of like overworking, not being able to disconnect. I'm in
Yeah.
my like,
Well, also, there's folks that when we first started, on paper, in an office, perfect candidate, way more disciplined than I'll ever be,
yeah.
but remotely could not handle it.
Yeah. And that's why for some people, they're like, oh no, I don't want a role that's remote, right? Like I need to be in an office, I need to be around
Yeah,
people, I need. So again, I think it comes down to, are we identifying the right profiles for the right
yeah,
roles within the organization? And there are some, like, I think a lot of roles can be done remotely, but I think when it comes, if your role has something to do with compliance or financial, like I don't think legal, I don't think accounting, I don't think anything risk or compliance should be able to be done from home. Like, if, I mean, right now my office is a complete disaster, but if I was a lawyer and I had piles and piles of stuff here and I've got two kids and a dog and all, they have friends come over or whatever, like that's not really compliant. Right. So I think certain roles, it has to be. The other roles that don't, like, then it's putting the right people in that role. Because if you put someone in an office position and they are better at home because they can set those boundaries, you're going to lose them anyway,
yeah,
right? Because it's just not gonna, it's so again, it's going back to what are your personal values? How do you align that with a company's values? And how, like, it's literally matchmaking,
yeah.
right? Which is wild in and of itself.
How sad is it that it's got dark in the back of your room at 4:30 in the
I
afternoon?
know it's dark here
I
too,
know.
and we've been talking for almost an hour and 40 minutes, and I had a feeling this was going to happen where we're having too much fun. We could do a part two of this.
Well, now you're going to roast our. We'll go through our hiring process. You roast it. It'll be a
Oh
fun
God, yeah,
conversation.
yeah, we'll do it.
Well, you haven't, Colby. You don't even know what it is. I bet you couldn't rattle it off. But we have
Probably
worked
not.
very hard on our process, from the hiring to the like we have strengths finder assessment, and that has the conversations, and then we have the thing that we do our employment proposal instead of an offer to have a
Okay.
bit of negotiation because our contract is a bit different because bandwidth and internet and device are on them, not us, and so we
Okay.
like it's different than a standard relationship, and our onboarding is pretty strongly processed out, and what we lay it on a bit thick in the first
Okay.
few weeks, and anyway, we don't have to do it, but I it sounds like we're getting you to work for free, but Colby's been
Well,
part of it.
roast.
He didn't design it.
He didn't design it. He didn't design it. How many steps are in your hiring process? Like from the time of like we've posted this job to the person is starting, how many steps do they need to go through?
Before onboarding, before selection.
Yeah, like from the time it's like they've applied to they have the offer.
So the written process, which we often don't follow fully,
Okay,
depending on the
nobody does.
situation,
It's okay.
is it's only a certain amount of people get an interview. The first
Yeah.
interview is 30 minutes, and
Okay.
it's done by a non-owner, non-decision maker. It's a team member,
Okay.
and there's a bit of a process to that. And if they feel like that's escalates, and we say like, would you spend $100 to learn more? Is the way we word it. Um,
Okay.
is we would do a personality assessment and a longer interview with multiple people in our team, including a decision maker in a group interview.
Okay.
And the only thing we would do other than that is sometimes we get them to do a written communication test. So it's an asynchronous, like, can you respond to this email?
Okay. So when you say group interview, how many people is that?
Two or three.
Okay.
And it's mostly because we want more of our team to feel like they own the hire, because then it makes a stronger onboarding.
Right. So I love that there's not a ton of steps because again, people aren't going to wait around for that. When do you have them do the assessment?
The follow up email from the last interview just says, "Hey, can you respond to this message?" And we don't always do it, but we found that like just we didn't realize how important it was that they could write.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? And a
Because
lot of
like
people
remember,
cannot.
we're industry like a lot of hospitality. They can be great in an interview, but if they can't actually
Right.
write,
Right. Right.
even if they like, I don't care if they use a tool to do it. But if I'm not getting like intended tone and purpose on writing as well as in person, that we learn
Yeah.
that the hard way.
Do all candidates that you like pre-interview to be like with that one team member for third, do they all get the Strength Finders assessment?
No,
How do you decide who gets that and who doesn't?
the person who does the 30 minutes.
They decide. They're like, okay, I'm going to move this person to the next step, or I'm not sure, and the
And
assessment's
the
going to help
language of
determine it.
like they're not spending their money, but would you spend $100? Like, don't move them forward unless you personally would spend company dollars to move them forward.
Okay, so you're not saying that to the candidate, you're saying that to the team member who's interviewing.
Yeah.
And so, okay, and then when you look at their resume and their resume comes in, how are you identifying a good one from a bad one when most resumes are not good?
That is the Wild West. Colby, myself, Aaron, we have very different opinions on the resume read. Yeah, that would
So
be
what's a
one of
good
them.
resume to you?
I'm a resume snob.
Tell me about this. What do you mean a resume snob?
Well, I kind of want, like, first of all, I won't move them forward if they don't have a LinkedIn profile. So I'm already
But no,
terrible.
that's fair. That doesn't make you a snob. If someone doesn't have a LinkedIn
Yeah,
profile
well,
today,
LinkedIn is like a part of the resume. I don't care about the cover letter.
I don't
Uh,
care about it either.
the I want it to be able to be articulate and read in the least amount of words possible. So I want it to be under 2 pages. I want it
Oh
to
my God,
be,
two.
yeah.
Two's too long. If it needs to be maybe max one. Eventually,
So
we're not even going to use cover letters. Like I think that's a 10 to 15 year thing.
it's great. It's great. I believe in the 2 pager because I want to see more. I'm a reader, so maybe I
Yeah,
can
oh
see
yeah.
more.
But you know
If
that the
you
foundation of the cover letter, if someone is just kind of trying to wing it, is Chat GPT and then refinessed because they don't know. Again, you think about it, if you can't write an email, how are you writing a cover letter?
Oh, not the
And if
cover letter. I
you,
don't want a cover letter at all. I
okay,
mean,
good.
the
Okay, okay,
resume
sorry, sorry.
itself, I
Okay.
like 2 pages.
Yes, yes. Okay, sorry. I thought we were still on cover
So
letters.
no, a cover letter, I just like take it or leave it. You can lose points of the cover letter. It's hard to gain points of the cover letter.
Yeah, and again, it's just part of a, like, again, we still need them because everybody wants them, but I can guarantee that there's a lot of recruiters that don't read them. I would only read them for a senior level position.
The only thing I've told people that you should write a cover letter is when they're introducing for some reason why they're not on paper qualified. Don't let them find out after invested time in your resume that you're not.
Right.
Like, manage expectations if that's necessary.
How many employers or potential employers do you think actually read cover letters?
So I think it depends on the size of company you're talking about. I think if you're a certain size, that they all do,
Okay.
because they geek out on it. I know a lot of people who actually make it a team fun exercise to go read everybody's and they pick them apart. Um, yeah, I think it depends on the company. I mean, know your audience is the first tenet of the resume. It's like, who are you going after? A government resume should be the same as a
No,
private
no.
sector.
Okay. So do you read cover letters? Yes, you do because you like to read.
Only in to see whether it is like over. If it's short to the point and concise, it's a
Yeah.
win. But I would look at the shape of it more than I would the content of it.
What do you think about resumes that have someone's picture and a bunch of colors on it?
If you are in a very creative space where that flamboyancy is really important, then go for it.
Well, it should also have a hyperlink to your portfolio.
Totally, or two or three. I believe that you should build what your potential employer wants to see and is used to seeing.
Okay. Trying to think of other questions. I'm like looking at what I ask people. What do you look for though, Colby, if you're different?
well, it's not.
He's like,
In
I don't
fact,
look at them.
well, I mean, honestly, I don't disagree with anything he just said. It's just I am not. I don't like long form.
I
Like
know.
if someone writes me a novel, I'm just not interested in reading it. So
I
If
know.
you try
short
to
and
find
concise.
how do they incorporate their experience or what they're good at other than work and school? I really look forward to that. And there's a lot of different ways people are doing it.
I'll also say that we've hired somebody based off their skateboarding skills before.
I
Uh,
have not.
yeah, so I we that's a true story. Yeah, we and he's still with us today. That's 5 years.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's 5 years. So I don't know. It's like I want to skip to the personal side of things quicker. Like I don't really like honestly. I don't probably pay attention enough to the resume side of things. I want to get to talking to them,
Hmm.
and like
Yeah.
that's more of like a judge of character type situation.
It's a little bit different now because all of our roles are working in projects, running projects, writing some kind of reports or deliverables. And so
Hmm.
we used to have a little bit different where we had like frontline, like we really have a very flat organization now. And yeah, I guess I'm always looking for that little bit of communication skill and writing concisely, getting more information in less words is the most important skill. And I try
People
to do
are really wordy because they try to like not over amplify themselves, but they're really wordy because they're trying to like sell themselves. Because again,
that.
like you make a decision on a resume in less than 6 seconds is the average. 10 is kind of like, very quickly when you open it up. So for me, if they're not in a creative space and I open it up and there are pictures on it, or it's got color blocking and it's a weird font that because they did a resume on Canva, I don't even care what their qualifications are. I delete it.
Yeah. I've often said is, well, you definitely stand out. It just didn't help you.
Right, right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, from that perspective, I think like wearing the recruiter hat all the time, or even like I'll have people send me stuff and I'll be like,
Yeah.
oh my God, like what have you? I don't like it when someone like gives me an objective statement, right? Because we know the objective is to get the job. Right. But I did have one guy, we were at a career fair and he brought his resume and his objective said, I get shit done. That was it.
Hmm.
Right? So you see, but not on your resume. So you see so much, but I'm like, okay, and if it's more than 2 pages, really a recruiter is not looking, or someone that's looking is not really going past page one. We're like, okay, they've captured enough to make me want to call them. I don't need to go to the second page because what's on page 2 and maybe 3, they're going to tell me about when I have that conversation with them. That's why LinkedIn is really great, right? Because I can look really quickly and see what I need. I
Well,
just can't
allow
necessarily
people to
contact you.
select see more if they want to go down the rabbit hole.
Right.
Like my
Yeah.
LinkedIn's a novel. Like I have everything back to high school, I think, and there's like, but you don't see it unless you went down the rabbit hole. So,
And
um,
not many people do. Like I know I think we feel that way, but like I had someone who they wanted to list every professional development course they had since like 1992. And I was like, but like nobody cares. And I don't mean that in a mean way. Like I'm not, but I'm like, no one is going to page 5 of your resume to look at everything you've done.
yeah.
But you can talk about it. And like I've done professional development every year since 1992, but like that's not where it goes on your resume
Mm.
No, it's at
at
the end of the
all.
day. Well, not the end. I keep saying that, but it's like not just here, but it's been a day in day out thing. But your resume is a marketing document, and
Yes.
almost all the marketing principles apply.
Yes.
First, come out with the audience members. Who's reading it? Why are they reading it? Is the information for them, or are you putting information on for you? Like, there's lots of marketing principles.
Hmm.
The other segue that I always look for is a lot of people that the first scan of a resume isn't looking at the second page, isn't reading a paragraph, is
Right.
looking for quick snap judgments. More often, in a lot of companies, not all, there's a second persona who will look at detail because they're going to work with you every day.
Right.
Your document has to do both.
Yes.
And you have to so it's just a lot of like mental thought and stuff. There's no fine rules, these like guiding principles.
No, but I wish one thing that was a rule is that we didn't just copy and paste our job descriptions into the body of the resume because, right? Like I say that to people all the time. Like if you're taking the job description you have and you're copy and pasting those bullets into your resume, you have literally not differentiated yourself in any way, shape, or form from the 5 other people on your team because what you achieve and what you can quantify and what you can speak to is different than everyone on the team that
Yeah.
does the same role. But that's what everybody does. Copy and paste their
The
job description.
Yeah, I've done a lot of resumes, a lot of hiring companies in our own, and I will say the positive. The one time I was blown away, she got hired, and I'll give her name. Maybe this will come out and we'll tag her in it. But it's Sarah Alston, who's is no longer on our team. But I put out a job description, and it just fit with what she was doing. It was in COVID, all this stuff, and she didn't send me a resume. No, she sent me a resume and a video cover letter, which I now know is much more common, but it was the first time I'd seen it, and it was short and concise and to the point, and I did watch it, and it was
Did
like
you?
nobody else would have been able to compare in memorability. The fact that it was concise and to the point, and it
Right.
was like a minute and 20 seconds, and it
Interesting.
wasn't a reading of the resume. It was just why.
Yeah,
Um,
and that personally, that would resonate with me more than reading
Yeah.
anything. If I
you could
would.
do it poorly, but that was the
You
first time I
totally
was like,
could.
that just killed. Like nobody else is going to compete because she happened to do it well.
Right. And it's hard to do that. I think it's hard for that to translate. But I mean, like, I think too, I've had people send the 3 page resume with a 2 page cover letter and they've attached like 5 reference letters.
Yeah.
No, we're not
Which
going to do
works
that.
at the government of New Brunswick because they have to read every word. They have to read every single word in every resume.
Yuck.
And they have to
I,
sign a document that
yeah.
they've read it all and this is what I got from it. They have to fill out a form on what they read and tick boxes of whether it contained that
See,
information.
this is ridiculous. And this is why. I've had people that will come to me too, like, I'm applying for a government job. I need help with my resume and I'm going to submit it. You think I'll hear from them like in the next week? And I'm like, no, I worked with a guy. We did his resume, we did his cover letter, and he was submitting for government. And we were doing 3 sessions together. And he said, so should we schedule like the third session so we can do some interview prep? That's what I would like to use that session for. And I was like, we can. He's like, okay, so I'll look at my calendar. And I'm like, no, wait until they reach out to you because it doesn't, and I said, it's not going to be like an overnight thing. It was 9 months from the time he submitted his resume until he got the call that they were moving him forward in the process. Like, if you're applying for a government, I can appreciate why, and I think that there's great opportunities. Don't expect that it's getting you out of the job or it's helping you find a job in 3 months because that's not happening.
It's unfortunately similar to the sales process.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We've got a 3-year sales process in some of these conversations.
Oh God, that's crazy.
But they need the most help. They need modernization. So
They do. They do.
Well, I'm feeling like we're getting to a logical pause point.
Okay, 2 hours, no big deal.
I love it. I'm so glad. I actually had forgotten that you guys haven't met already prior to this. So
And I figured
that
you
was
had
exciting.
not done any prep at all. Like I'm thinking over prepared. So I had a podcast called Real Entrepreneurial Stories, and it was long format conversations around each person's perspective on being an entrepreneur. I couldn't keep it up, but we did 16 episodes, and I had like scheduled. I had pre-send outs. I did a half-hour pre-call. I was like, I like this way better.
Well, I did the pre-call. I did do that, and yeah, I did do that. So we,
Told me the pre-call was, you want to be on the podcast? And I was like, hell yeah. And then yesterday, you're like, are you ready? I'm like, totally.
Yeah.
Well,
My
well,
pre-call
we
was
did.
like, what can I do in this podcast to help you? And let me try to lay some groundwork. So speaking of that, is there any call to action you can share? Like, what do you want people to do? If they get to 2 hours in, they're a fan of the Jen Warrington. What do you want them to do next?
I want them to connect with me on LinkedIn and tell me that they listened to the whole thing. And I think, like if it's someone who's looking for a career, I think that I want them to like explore all of the information that we put out like on our website, on Instagram and LinkedIn, because we really try to give a ton of value by putting stuff there and just again letting people see the possibility. And then I think if it's an organization that's like, oh, is my hiring process broke? If you're asking yourself the question, it totally is. I think
In
even if
all
you're
life
not.
situations, if you have to ask,
Yeah. And I think when it comes to hiring, if you're not asking, like if you don't think, if you think it's fine, I can guarantee that there's some love that it needs. So I would also say like LinkedIn would be the place because I'd love to have conversations around like how do we even just audit it and look at it and say, you're good. Like what you guys are doing, like I know we were supposed to roast it, but like it's not too long, it's a little bit creative and it's got the right people involved. If you had said to me like, well, there's this, and this, and we want a presentation and all the things, I would have been like that's too long. Candidates aren't going to stick around from that. But most people need kind of like that 30,000 foot view that they can say, okay, someone else has looked at this, and like I'm in it every single day. I'm in it with candidates and I'm in it with organizations of all different sizes. There are some best practices that we could probably lean into for somebody.
mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah.
Love it. I love it.
Happy weekend.
Yeah, and you know what? Frig you guys. Jen and I talked for 3 hours 2 weeks ago, and she didn't even know I was thinking about a podcast. So that was my sneaky little pre-call, and here we are.
That's